now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Live with Roger Hanson. Today is another good interview that's getting ready to take place. This is with Neroke5. Before we get that started, I want to introduce everyone. Here we have DDJ. He's going to be on the panel with me asking questions. He's returning now to ask questions to Neroke5, who was on his interview on the panel asking questions to DDJ. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome you guys here, and if you want to say hi, say hi.
Hello.
Thank you for having me back.
No problem. It was great having you the first time. So, with that being said, I am going to also let everybody know that this is about custody laws and stuff like that. And this isn't because you guys know what it's about, Neroke and DDJ, but like people, when they watch it and when they listen, I want them to understand that this is about custodial rights and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that are going to be sensitive but discussed, and it's going to consist of.
You're breaking up, man.
It's okay. Is that better?
Say something.
Yeah. Can you hear me better?
Okay. Yeah, you're better. Yeah. Now, yeah.
Now, it's going to consist of some pretty intense topics, considering refusal to allow parents to visit their kids and stuff like that. So, just so you know, it's got a lot of stuff that's in there that's going to be discussed. So just be aware of that before we get started.
Before we get started, Roger, do you have a noise gate on your microphone at all?
No, the issue seems to only be with Skype. I use like 3 or 4 other.
It says, I'm sorry, the last part you broke up. Say that again.
I said the only issue I've ever had with this kind of stuff is on Skype. I use other forms of this stuff.
So you think it's a Skype issue?
Yeah, it really is. I use Jitsi even, and I don't even have this issue. So.
Okay.
So with that being said, let me ask Neroke5 to give us a little background about himself. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we can get into asking you questions. I'll give it to you, Neroke.
All right. Yeah, I can barely. I only caught part of that, but I'll give you my background story. My entry into the manosphere was more of a slow burn as opposed to what happened with DDJ. It's not one thing that got me into the manosphere, although I have actually, like, literally on Saturday, a friend of mine from the 12 Steps, he actually showed up at my home group on Saturday, and he apparently forgot everything I told him about child custody and toxic exes, and he immediately slipped back into trying to handle it all himself and taking his chances with the actual system itself. And he's in an even worse spot than he was when I knew him back in 2020. And there's going to be a lesson that I'm going to, because my experience with the manosphere is not specific with child custody, marriage, and divorce. There's other aspects of the manosphere that I think also need to be discussed. Although child custody and father's rights and corrupt family and marriage courts and the way the child custody situation is stacked is obviously like the numero uno issue in the manosphere, particularly if you're a men's rights activist. There are other aspects of the manosphere that are bringing men into the manosphere, as well as just you know corrupt courts and corrupt government structures.
Okay.
And yeah, I got my actual story from where I actually first got introduced to the manosphere to where I actually became, like, say, full on, fully active MGTOW in the manosphere is not one thing. It's a series of things.
Okay. So, you mind discussing them?
No, I don't mind at all. In fact, I'm gonna be pretty much almost telling you the same thing that I told DDJ. DDJ, by the way, was actually my first actual ever interview with anybody when I started doing podcasting myself. In fact, DDJ's interview, I remember this because I was still on YouTube at the time. DDJ's interview got me up over 100 subs. That was a long time ago. I still will go back and listen to it.
More than 5 years. Yeah, it was a good interview.
Yeah, it was. So, okay, well, my story. Well, to start out with, every woman that I knew growing up was either had narcissistic personality disorder or had really severe drug and alcohol issues. Like, all of them. And all of the issues that tied up into that, really, that was not a good foundation. Um, First actual real incident that I recall, that I noticed something was wrong, is that my one of my mom's boyfriends back in the 70s, we would go out to this one guy's place and we would drop off food and supplies to this guy, and it was like, you know, and then she was talking about him one time, and it was like, it's like, oh well, he's living out in that shack because his wife divorced him, and it's like she's basically taking everything. And I was like, well, why the hell would she want to do that? And it's like, well, can't he just ask for it back? He says, yeah, and there's nothing. Yeah, the courts have made up their mind, right? That felt wrong, and it still feels wrong. I don't have no idea what happened to that guy. Around the same time, my brother, who married his high school sweetheart, got a divorce from his first wife. And I mean, I didn't think, and she got custody of the kids and everything because, like, my brother also had substance abuse issues. Now, he's resolved those substance abuse issues, but he resolved them just in time to find out that his now ex was attempting to put and these were not infants, by the way. My two nephews were, I'm guessing they were probably like 8 and 10 at the time. Like, they were not infants. She attempted to put these two boys up for adoption and not tell my brother. My brother found out about this because one of my now ex-sister-in-law's relatives grew a conscience and actually told him. He got the kid. He took the kids. He took them back with him to where he was living, and this promptly started a legal battle. And even though the mother, my ex-sister-in-law, had attempted to put these kids up for adoption, the judge gave full custody and child support to the mother anyway. This happened right in the middle of a family reunion. I wasn't actual, so we had to go in the middle of a family reunion on a Sunday. He had to drive over and turn the kids over to his ex, and then come back. Now, I wasn't there for the actual exchange, but I got to see the after effect. And my brother he's a tough guy, and it's the only time in my entire life where I've seen him where he looked utterly broken. Like, he was sitting, because we were having the second part of the reunion at my aunt's place. I remember looking in the back, and he was like, I could tell he'd been crying, right? And I remember walking away from that thinking, holy sh, man, like, I am never having kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't had kids. Uh, there were some other events along the way, like when I first started having my drug issues, which I resolved in the mid 80s. I started going to 12-step meetings, and there was a group of women at these meetings who hated me just because I was a guy. And it was like, well, why do you dislike me? It's like, I haven't done anything to you, right? Like, you have no reason. I mean, I'm in these rooms with you as an equal. Like, what is your problem? And of course, no big surprise, most of these women, they either grew out of it and got better, or they relapsed and disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
The What really kind of kicked it, so I mean, not a good foundation. And then we get up to where I had to start dealing with false accusations of stalking. And the first one happened, and I talked about this on DDJ. I was working at the Chateau Lake Louise, and there's this one woman who worked there, and it was like, she was really polite and helpful and nice to me, and I was nice, polite, and helpful with her. And I mean, it was like out of sight, out of mind, right? Every time I saw her, I'd walk over, say hi, how you doing, whatever, right? Have a quick conversation, and then leave, right? Out of sight, out of mind. About 2 weeks into 2 weeks into working there, the guy that I had become best friends with came up to me and said, you need to stop talking to this one woman. It was like, who? And it was like, and he told me who it was, and I was like, no, like, I'm in no way interested in her. It's like, I see her, I walk over, I say hello, I have a quick conversation, then I go on with the rest of my day. Right? It's not about her, but she had made it about her. I had, what am I thinking? Probably between the time when I did the Sterling Men's Weekend and the time that occurred, I had to deal with probably 3 or 4 things like that. And I mean, like I say, I'm in the 12-step program. So I mean, I was smart enough to figure out that the consistent, because there's a couple of steps in the 12-step program that require you to do an inventory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and when I did an inventory, like, I came to the obvious conclusion, like, the consistent factor in all of these situations is me. So there's something about me that was wrong, but I would go through and I just couldn't see it, right? Like, what was I doing wrong? And even after I did the men's weekend, I was still dealing with this all the way up until probably like 2010, where every once in a while some woman would just like randomly accuse, like, that I would be interacting with, would just randomly accuse me of stalking her. And there was like, sometimes there was interest in there, but most of the time there wasn't. And I would be looking back afterwards, and I could see where they were setting me up, and I couldn't figure out.
Do you mind if I dovetail that a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, because there's a couple things that you brought up that I think that deserve a little bit of development, and the first thing is, and obviously you've been through 12 steps, so you could probably talk a little bit more about this at some point as well, is that, typically when it comes to men, when they have drug and alcohol problems, typically it's because of some event that they've gone through where they didn't feel like they had the social support to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not 100% of the case. I'm speaking in generality. So, that's the program. I just want to let people understand kind of where that comes from. So a lot of times if a man becomes homeless, it's because either job loss, there's like 3 main reasons. One is job loss, one is relationship loss, and the third one is drug addiction. And so, and I say drug addiction, I include alcohol in there as well. But as far as a lot of the drug addiction and alcohol addiction, usually those things occur because the man is attempting to cope with a situation that he's not equipped for, emotional or psychological situation, and so he uses the drugs and alcohol to self-medicate. Occasionally, obviously, it's there's situations like methamphetamine is a different animal, because methamphetamine is harder to overcome because it attacks the dopamine receptors.
It is a beast, man. It's
a
beast.
Heroin is the same sort of thing. So those are outliers. Anything that attacks dopamine receptors or anything like that. But as far as like LSD, marijuana, alcohol, those kind of things, those addictions are typically used to self-medicate to deal with emotional and psychological issues. As far as false allegations are concerned, typically the women that deal with false allegations, they use false allegations. In some cases, they use false allegations to cover up for infidelity. Right? So they got caught cheating, or they got caught being promiscuous, and in order to say, oh, I'm not promiscuous, they make a false allegation of sexual assault or harassment or stalking or whatever, right? Insert here, right? And they do that specifically to gain social credibility. And so in your situation, what it sounds like is you had these women that were insecure, and they figured that they would go ahead and create social credit at your expense. And typically they do that. Like if there's a man around that's a thinker, if there's a man around, so like I've talked about this, and I talked about this on the last stream, where men are the top of the IQ chart, but we're also the booger-eating morons and the knuckle draggers at the bottom too, right? So a lot of people who achieve societal success and in professional success, they don't necessarily do it out of merit. They do it because maybe they're midwits, but they know how to be proper yes men, right? They know how to take an order, they know how to look busy, and you see this all the time, especially with incompetent managers and things like that. We see it obviously in our political systems as well. A lot of incompetent politicians out there. So as far as all that's concerned, if you're a thinker, and a lot of guys who are either in the manosphere, specifically in MGTOW, a lot of guys who adopt the MGTOW lifestyle, they're thinkers. Thinkers threaten everyone around them because we sit outside the social order. So like, if you've been involved in the manosphere, for example, you hear about the alpha beta paradigm. I've actually done a video where I kind of debunk that a little bit, but we'll use it for sake of, because it's so mainstream now, we'll use it for sake of this conversation. So typically you have your manosphere alpha beta paradigm, your alpha fucks, your beta bucks, but MGTOW sit outside of that. Generally speaking, MGTOW are what's referred to as sigma. And what that means is they sit outside the alpha beta omega order, and they kind of do their own thing, and in their own way as sigmas, they become kind of a unique lone wolf style alpha in their own right, and that is very threatening to midwit men, insecure men, and specifically insecure women, because women have been indoctrinated to go after the bad boy, to be indoctrinated to go after the poor decision maker. And so when a legitimately strong man, a decent man, an ethical man shows up, they don't know how to process that. They're like, well, shit, that guy's a threat to me, because he exists, and his existence disproves my assumptions about things, and more importantly, it interferes with my dysfunctional comfort zone, right? And what I mean by dysfunctional comfort zone is you always hear about those people that they get involved with people that they know they're unhealthy with, they know they're not relationship material, and they try to make a relationship, and they end up self-destructing themselves, the relationship, things around them, because they're in this unhealthy relationship, and then they leave that relationship and they get into another unhealthy relationship, and that's the dysfunctional comfort zone that I talk about. So when a guy who shows up, I can't tell you how many times, and Neroke will know this as well, I can't tell you how many times women will actually go after MGTOW for a relationship because they know that we're stronger men than a lot of other men out there. And I've spoken to a lot of content creators behind the scenes, and there's, you hear about the incel, mom's basement, that kind of, those allegations. Obviously, that's just kind of shaming language that we just choose to ignore. But there's a lot of times where these women will chase MGTOW guys, or they will be attracted to MGTOW guys, and they don't know how to process that. So that paints a target on our back. And one of those targets, as Neroke has aptly described, is the false allegations and the targeting by certain women at job sites and in professional settings. And if you're a man listening to this, don't be surprised about that. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of add a little bit of context to that and a little bit of background knowledge for people, because what Neroke's talking about is very common amongst MGTOW men.
Okay, yeah, I will expand on that. Yeah, that's weird because I mean I've discussed this with some other MGTOW over the years, and before I get back into my story, I have had on occasions, even though I'm not specifically looking for a relationship, I've had, if I'm not staying on top of it, if I just go on autopilot, and this has happened to me, and this has happened to some other MGTOW guys that suddenly, there's like 3 or 4 women vying for my attention, and it was like, I mean, I had to, and John the other, I don't know who, DDJ probably knows what I'm talking about. He's got an actual
I know
channel.
who he is. Yeah.
He talked about this one time on a podcast, and it was like he had to actually go and like go. This is like, because John the other, and you've seen seen him on video. He's not an attractive fucking guy.
Well, and let's expound on that a little bit, because let me tell you something. There's women who talk to me, and I'm not necessarily young, and I'm not the most physically fit guy, but there's women I talk to, and there's women I've dated who have no business talking to me or dating me, right? And there are guys who are empirically younger and more attractive that they should be talking to, and they don't want anything to do with those guys. And that's not unique to me. I'm just a nobody behind a keyboard. But Neroke hit the nail right on the head. This happens a lot to MGTOW guys. These women will throw themselves at them, and it's like, you're not a supermodel, you're not rich, you're not necessarily Mr. Social, but whatever.
Yeah, it's like, and John the other was saying this about one of the jobs he was at, and he had to actually make an effort to make himself even more anonymous. But getting back to the original point of this point, where I was at, and it's like I would routinely run into this. What ended up happening is I got a job around 2012, 2013, and a couple of things happened right around that time. First of all, there was an incident. There was this is pre-Gamergate. This tells you how long ago this happened. There was a inside the atheist community, there was this group called Atheism Plus, and I got not DDJ, TJ Kirk, otherwise known as the Amazing Atheist, kind of like sounded the alarm about this group, and it was like he was like talking about it, and it was like, it's like, and they want to combine social activism with atheism. And at the time, I was like thinking, well, because I mean, at that point in time, like I was like somebody who would have voted Democrat. In Canada, I would have voted with the NDP. I mean, I didn't see the issue, the problem. I did, within about 3 or 4 months, see what the problem was. Essentially what happened with the Atheism Plus crowd is that, I mean, essentially what they were doing, and this is a very similar pattern because it's happened in every group that I've seen it, but in particular with atheism, what happened is it's like, okay, if it comes from a religious figure, or if it comes from a politician, or it comes from a celebrity, out come the scalpels and the sledgehammers, and they just logic bomb the ever-living crap out of the person. But if it came from a feminist or a social justice warrior, I was expected to just take the knee and just agree with whatever they were saying without question.
Sounds like Reddit.
Yep, and the whole issue was just, and there was a substantial number of people in the atheist community, TJ Kirk, Sargon Avocado, a lot of more than a few, who are like going, no, you are critical of everybody. Armored Gregory is another one, the Armored Skeptic. You're critical of everybody, even the people you agree with politically. And at that point in time, I did. And, I was under the assumption that if you just had, because I was pretty fairly naive at that point, that if you just had a rational discussion with these people, that, try not to laugh as I say this, by the way, if you have a rational discussion with these people, they would understand. But it was like, no, they wouldn't listen. right? They refused. They were just absolutely. It was their way or the highway. Period. And that
Well, and,
started.
and, and, and to kind of add a little bit on that, just so for people who know, like a lot of us who were either, whether it's, anybody who involved in online discourse over, say, the last 5 or 10 years, maybe even 15 years, right? A lot of us, we all started out with the good faith argument of, well, maybe if we just explain the facts to them, they'll understand, they'll get it, and they'll see that, yeah, this is kind of the direction, especially when you've got irrefutable facts and truth on your side. Well, your problem is it when you level that sort of mentality to a disagreement, you falsely enter the assumption, and we've all done it, I've done it as well, right, where you assume that the person your disagreement exists with, or the person who's saying something that really just is so stupid it doesn't pass the straight face test, you assume that they're acting in good faith, right? That maybe they're just ignorant or retarded or something, and if you just explain it to them, this is okay. But the reality is that, and this is what kind of pushed the manosphere, back in the day, was that these people are fanatics. They have no interest in understanding your perspective, and if you commit the cardinal sin of disagreeing with them, well, then, yeah, you're cancer and you deserve to be destroyed in a full spectrum sort of way. So I totally understand where Neroke's coming from, because like I said, yeah, it's naive now, but Neroke and I have been around a long time. So, but everybody new to the internet, we all go through it, right? None of us is exempt from it. So go on, Neroke.
Yeah.
Now,
So
hold
what
hold
I
on, Rocky. We have Karma Love here. I want to welcome her and officially welcome her to the thing. She
all right.
came in
Well,
just a little while ago, so.
all right. All right. Welcome, Karma. So yeah, and this was pre-Gamergate. What I had to do is that I had to, because I had already done this Men's Sterling weekend about 15 years earlier, is that I had to keep going to the few men's groups that I had found online to get the information that I needed to combat these, because they would literally, they would argue, and DDJ knows this. They will argue, they will double down to the point of absolute stupidity, and they will just stay
Yes.
there.
Yeah,
And
and that was an argument we always brought on the MGTOW. Like MGTOW 101 type knowledge is always feminists and bigots always double down, and they never want us to consider anything else, and they'll just continue to double down, like he said, until they get to past full retard to full potato.
Yep, and I found one site, the catalog of male shaming tactics, that was absolutely essential for me when I was first dealing with this. Then Gamergate came along. That was the first time that they had actually.
Hold on right there, Naoki. That's actually a good thing to kind of discuss. When you found that, could you kind of describe what it was about and what it pertained with?
Well, sorry, in regards to what, MGTOW, or in regards to Atheism Plus?
No, well, you were just talking about men shaming.
Oh, catalog of male shaming tactics. Yeah, it's a blog post up at WordPress, and this guy literally, I can't remember who it was that wrote it down, but he literally broke it down into sections and gave each one a code, and each one of the codes was, you can't get laid, which I don't know what code that was, but it's basically incel. You're afraid, you hate women, da da da. You're bitter. There was about 8 or 9 of them.
Who hurt you?
Who hurt you? Which, by the way, it took me a while. That one took a while to sink in. It's that's usually an attempt with the people that hasn't come up very much with me lately. But that's usually an attempt when I'm talking with somebody. It tends to get used by women a lot, that one. That's an attempt to reframe it into an emotional base as opposed to keeping it logical. That's what I've noticed when that one gets used.
Well, and interestingly enough, I mean, just to dovetail what Neroke says, it's not only emotional; it's a logical fallacy in that it's an appeal to emotion, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like when women will publicly say, "Oh, well, you just can't get laid." Well, they usually say it publicly because they need an audience, right? The women that actually deploy these tactics, they need an audience, and so it's kind of like an ad populum fallacy. They're not really talking to you; they're talking at you. They're talking to the crowd in an effort to get the crowd to turn on you. So you have to understand that, like, there's tactics that are involved with some of this shaming language, and they're used in different contexts and in different environments for maximum effect. But they're all, I mean, if you really want to bunch them up together, they're all like gaslighting, projection, and shaming, kind of one of those three categories, because they really, number one, like if Neroke was to say something, Neroke took a position in an argument or in a subject of controversy, Neroke takes a position and says, "This is my position." They won't respond to that position that he's taken. They won't disagree with it, or they'll disagree with it, but they won't give any kind of reasoning. They'll just say, "Oh, well, I disagree because you're an incel," or "I disagree because you can't get laid," or "I disagree because who hurt you," type of thing. They won't actually respond to anything Neroke said. They don't even give a shit about what he said, other than whatever he said threatened them emotionally and psychologically. So you have to understand that's how these tactics are used, and typically they're typified with feminists, with misandrists, and with people who like predatory women who specifically go after men to harm them. But yeah, so anyway, let me back off of this so Neroke can finish this thing, because you got to shut me up sometimes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's. So I entered into that arena, and I had to keep going over to the few men's sites that I actually belong to. Along the way, I started discovering people. Karen Strawn, who actually lives in the same city I do, and I actually knew her sister. She was one of the first people I discovered. John, the other, was a guy I discovered. By the way, this is pre-Sandman. Like, Sandman hadn't even started making videos yet. He just actually recently, like about 3 weeks ago, had his 10th anniversary. Just a little side note there. This is pre-Sandman. So I was having to go back, and I was having to like arm up, and it was like it started getting nasty. But along the way, I started following some threads. Among the threads I discovered, there was a guy, R.K. Hendrick, who I think DDJ knows about, who wrote a book, How to Get Laid Without Getting Screwed, right? And he wrote a book on how to protect yourself from a legal perspective when dealing with women. That book, I have pulled that book out with so many guys, and specifically the first couple of chapters on how to cover your ass legally. But among the other books that I discovered was one written by Dr. Helen Smith called Men on Strike, and I read the bio for it, and it was like, oh, this is interesting. So I ordered both books at the same time. Went through R.K. Hendrick's book, and I went through When Men on Strike, which, by the way, if you're a MGTOW, I think that is a book every single... that and The Predatory Female are two books, I think, that every guy who's MGTOW needs to read. Although I haven't actually gotten around to. I've seen excerpts from The Predatory Female, but I've never actually read it. But it's been highly recommended. But Men on Strike,
Manipulated Man is another good one as well.
Yeah. So I read it, and it was like, and I was like reading what Helen Smith wrote down there, and I was like, and it was like, whoa. So all of this stuff that I was here, that I was feeling, that I was feeling about marriage, about relationships, about my interactions with women, and all that stuff, and my decision to kind of move away from that. And it was like, and I had kind of figured all this stuff out on my own. It was like, so I'm not the only one who's like that. And I said that on DDJ's interview. with him, and it was like, and then I started immediately going online because the term Helen Smith used was called going galt, because Helen Smith wrote this book in 2012, and I don't even think if there were 3,000 MGTOW on the entire planet at that time, that would be a surprise.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I was gonna say they'd be lucky if you'd have 500, because I think MGTOW at that point was actually a term, but I don't think anybody really talked about it. But yeah, 3,000 is a real high number.
yeah. So I started looking around. I did the YouTube search and whatever, and I did it on Facebook, and I what ended up happening is that somebody actually pointed out to me, no, it's not going galt. It's this term called MGTOW, which I had occasionally stumbled into on chats, but nobody had given specific details. So I started looking on it. It was like my mind got opened. It was like, so yeah, literally, no, I'm not the only one. No, all of my experiences and all the stuff that I had suspected, it wasn't me just being delusional. It wasn't me being an idiot. It wasn't me being out to lunch. Like, I mean, it wasn't just me. And that started me down the path. But I fully didn't fully embrace MGTOW until 2016. And yeah, I'm also going to throw this in at this point because I think this is a really important thing to point out, because I've talked with a lot of other MGTOW that have had this happen to them. Every single woman that I got involved with either had some serious issues, was seeing another boy, was seeing someone else, or dropped me to go off, and they would drop me. So basically, they dropped me off to go after the asshole, and then would end up breaking up with him 4 to 6 months later, crying her eyes out. And I'm like, like when they did, I still am like this. If they do that now, I have zero sympathy for them. Right? It's like, yeah, no, you're bad. You made it. You lie in it. You made the choice. You chose, and it was that. That's basically what happened. The last one happened. I was going through a really difficult phase in my life, and this one woman she did really, because I mean, I actually did some shit tests on her to make sure that I wasn't this. I knew enough to make sure that she really liked me, and she did. And I kind of lost contact with her for about 2 months. And when I did try to get back in contact with her again, her basic response was, "Fuck you, bye." No explanation, no nothing. And I found out probably about 2, 3 weeks later why. And yeah, basically, she had basically told me to fuck off and die, so she could go off, and yeah, I'm gonna say it, so she could bang the tatted up dude bro who, and I'm not lying about this, broke up with her at the end of the summer. And my understanding is that it didn't really, well, like, it wasn't a nasty breakup, but basically he just lost interest and it just ended. Oh, and by the way, while he was banging her, he was also seeing her best friend behind her back.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that, be careful what you wish for. And, in a lot of cases too, when it comes to women like that, they will, they'll break up with you, go do what they're gonna do, go be with the dude bro or whatever, be the tatted up guy they shouldn't be with, and then they know that relationship's not gonna work, and then they want to recycle you and bring you back into the orbit in hopes that you're basically like their lifeline, when they stray out too far into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah,
And
I made it very clear to her that I was not, like, she wasn't going to be able to break up with this guy and then come running back to me. I made that really goddamn clear to her. Um,
Now,
but yeah, that's what she was saying, right? That's what.
I know, like, whenever you were talking, you about being in recovery, you said that you had to do an inventory on yourself, and it was about seeing, like, I've been in recovery too, and I know you have to find your own
A
where you
searching
played
and
it.
fearless moral
Yeah, where
inventory.
you had to
Yeah.
play your part in it. And
Yeah.
just when you were getting to that, that's when you started talking about everything else. Now,
Well, I mean,
when you got to that part, what was it that last part that you were talking about?
oh,
What was it that you found out about yourself?
well, I mean, I went through it, and the two times that I did it, I looked at it, and it was like I couldn't see it, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I did everything that I thought was the correct thing to do, and this is the last part, and then we'll start getting into some of the topics here. What ended up happening right around the same time that Miss 2016, that's my name for her, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to use her real name. Did this. I was listening. I was a heavy listener to Tom Likas, and Tom Likas had not Helen Smith, but Tara Palmachier on discussing false accusations. And Tara Palmachier, uh, during the interview with Tom Likas, she pointed out that there is a particular personality type that tend to fall victim to
Mm-hmm.
false accusations. And
Yep.
she pointed out that these women, first of all, she pointed out there are serial false accusers. And the women that engage in serial false accusing, all of like the majority of the men that fall victim to this all have this personality type. And she listed off all of these traits. Yeah, and yeah, this is gonna make a few people cringe who listen to this because it's sort of like a lot of, especially a lot of blue pill guys, like a lot of these behaviors are things that you think that you should be doing, and they are, but you got to be really careful with whom you do them. Considerate, thoughtful, polite, soft-spoken, not necessarily assertive, right? Basically, these women who engage in serial false accusations will intentionally pick guys that they perceive as being easy targets that are not going to create too much trouble for them. And on the occasions, and I had one where this is like 1996, where I literally, like, she sent somebody into my workplace to give me trouble about her, even though I wasn't doing anything. And I had to go, and I like looked at him, and we discussed it, and he was reasonable and rational about it. And I'm like, I had to tell her. It's like, you tell her, right? Like, I mean, first of all, sending you in here to get in my face about this, that's a form of harassment in of itself, right? So yeah, thank you for being reasonable with me. Here's the deal, right? You tell her that if I have to deal with this in any form or fashion again after this, the next person she's going to be talking to about me is going to be a police officer. And
Mm-hmm.
not 3 days later, and what I was living in a resort town. I ran into her, and she like literally started up with the melodrama all over again. And I left. I like literally, because as it turned out, the RCMP would have lunch in the restaurant of the hotel I was working at. So I actually approached this one. There was one female constable, and I filed a complaint against her. And she went over, and she dealt with the issue, and that was it. It was game over. And I mean, never. So I was operating under the assumption that if you were all of these things, that the woman would like you and would see that you're a decent, kind human being, as opposed to the assholes that she was usually dealing with, and she would pick you. And it turns out that those very with serial false accusers, those are the very things that they will use against you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, yeah, that really caused me to change my approach to how I deal with women after that. And it's been like I haven't had an issue since. Like, I mean, after 2016, I have not had to deal with any type of issue at all. Mostly because, I mean, it's like I had to change the rules of how I deal with women. And after that, like I was like within about a year out of, I think it was, within about a year doing that. That's when I actually started the Red Pill Nation, and that's when I was already doing a blog at that point, but I mean that's when I actually started doing my podcasting career. And you know, my podcast, the Red Pill Nation Hangout, isn't just about the manosphere. I do other topics there as well. But I mean, I am MGTOW to the core. I know too much about the dynamics of marriage. I know, and this is the best quote I've heard. I know, and this is something that I don't see. I see very few people willing, specifically men to face up to. Is that literally, and every single interaction that you have with a female, with a woman, de facto hands her a metaphorical gun that she can turn and use on you at a moment's notice. Yes, most women won't do that. But the fact of the matter is that every woman can. So it's like when I'm dealing with women now, I handle women the same way, say, a miner would handle nitroglycerin. And I mean, you want to call me paranoid, you want to call me a misogynist, you want to call me afraid, you want to give me, you can use any label that you want to. It's like, you want to get pissed at me for saying that? It's like, sorry, you know what? Don't get pissed at me, right? How about maybe you get pissed at the women that are doing this? Because it's not just me, and the numbers are growing.
Well, and let's put it another way, right? If you're baking anything, you have a pizza in the oven, cookies, cake, bread, anything you have in the oven, right? Are you going to open the oven and you're going to reach into it with your bare hands and pull everything out? No, you're going to burn yourself each and every time you do it. But nobody says, well, you're just being paranoid that you think the oven's going to burn you, even though it's at 475 or 375 or 350 or 425, whatever it is, right? Nobody has shaming language like that, even though it's common sense that if you put your hand in the oven without an oven mitt or something to protect your hand, you're going to get burned. Well, that's the reality with many narcissistic modern women. And it's not even like the millennials necessarily. I've seen it with older Gen X women. I've seen it with younger Zoomer women. Like there are women in every one of these generations that absolutely need to be avoided. And even when I was a young child, guys would tell each other, hey, you can't turn a whore into a housewife. That's as true today as it was when I heard it as a child. So, again, I'm not even saying hashtag not all or anything like that, but Neroke's absolutely correct. There are a lot of women out there who treat their men very well, but they still have a loaded gun. You need to understand that it's just like firearms, right? Anytime you handle a firearm, you need to treat it as loaded. Whether it's loaded or not is irrelevant. The point is you treat it as loaded because you want to run zero tolerance, because if you don't, that one time you put your guard down, that gun's going to be loaded and somebody's going to get killed. It's the same thing in modern relationships, even though that's a bit more of an extreme analogy.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just bring up a recent example. There's a guy who I told you earlier about that one guy from the program who just recently, he's been reduced down to the level of a plow horse. Mm-hmm. His old kid is 5 years old. He's doing 60 to 80 hours a week, and the reason why, and he can't quit those jobs now because when his ex, because he ended up having a medical situation very similar to a person who mentioned it's a similar situation to something that you had, DDJ, that you were just talking about before the show started, and he needed to do the extra work to help pay for some of his medical expenses. His ex found out about a second job, and she took him to court, and she got extra child support, which, of course, she's not actually accountable to have to spend on the kid. So now, and I had to say it to him flat out. It's like, yeah, dude. First of all, you should have, because I gave him some instruction about his ex back 3 years ago, and I told him, it's like, yeah, dude, you should have contacted me like right away when this happened, because it's like now, and this is the same sort of situation as with a 12 with somebody in a 12-step program that relapses. Yeah, when they come back in, they have a bigger hole to dig themselves out of because their addiction got them into a deeper hole. This is the same thing. Now it's like he's effectively an indentured servant, and to get him out of that situation is going to take time, money, energy, and it's like, and he has to actually want to do it. And I'll bring up another example of another guy who I was talking to online, and he's got the same issue that Jean. I mean, DDJ knows this guy who I'm talking about. I won't go bad into his backstory unless you ask. Jean, he's got it. He's got sexual taste the same as what Jean Gomeshi had, and the women.
I like to French kiss rattlesnakes.
Yeah, and the women that are into that are really emotionally and mentally. A lot of them are. I'm not saying all of them are.
They make normal women look not crazy.
Yeah, the women who are into that are not particularly stable, and I have told him repeatedly, because every once in a while he'll message me about some crazy woman, and I look at him.
Not particularly stable. That's really tactful of Neroke.
Yeah. Mentally unstable, and it's like, and I keep telling him, it's like, yeah, dude, right? Like, you're gonna hit the wrong one at some point, and it's like, oh well, that's 1 in 100,000. And it's like, at one point, he literally sends me a nude of one of these women. It's like, I had to tell him, it's like, yeah, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about with DDJ here at one point. It's like, like, why did you do that, dude? Like, you just broke the law. You know that, right? You just broke the law, right? If the cops come and they look at your computer and they say that, and that's the reason why I had to send this message back to him. It's like, the cops will start asking me questions about this. So, I mean, I have to tell you this on Messenger, right? Like, if the cops come asking me questions about this, I'm going to have to, I will not be able to cover for you, right? Like, don't do it again. And he was like looking at me going, well, you're just being paranoid. And what happens 2 days ago? He sends me another message. He has a new woman in his life, and this new woman is basically using legal force. Like, she's basically saying, it's like, you're going to be my boyfriend, or I'm going to go to the police and tell them that you raped me. And I'm like, I didn't want to be cruel with this guy, but I mean, I had to point out to him, it's like, I'm sorry this happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very sorry this happened to you, but it's like, yeah, I told you, right, that this is going to happen. Oh, and by the way, put as much distance as you can between you and this woman as you can. If you can get document her actually saying this, that would also help. And oh, by the way, even if you comply, it's not going to stop there, right? Because she was like, you slept with her once or twice, and she's already resorting to this. Like, what's going to happen down the road?
Well, she's extorting him,
Yeah, it's extortion.
Yeah, it's extortion, and that's a crime. But your problem is that the legal system at all levels, criminal and civil, is so gynocentric that even if he brought it up, the second she starts bringing up false allegations, you're talking, $50,000-$100,000 of legal fees that most people can't afford, and she'll destroy his life, because the process is the punishment, even if he's innocent.
Yeah, that's what we talked about on the last show. So yeah, I really think, to the men that are listening to this, if you, if you want to slap whatever label you want to justify whatever you want to justify when it comes to dealing with the opposite sex on this, go ahead. Like, you're free to fact check anything that I'm going to say on this show to find out whether I'm correct or not. it is not, and I gotta be blunt here, it is not my problem if you cannot handle the truth. If you want to be blissfully, you want to pull that state of blissful ignorance that Bezmenov was talking about, be my guest. You know what? Don't get pissed at the mess. And to quote, I mean, yeah, I know, I don't know what DDJ's opinion on Just Pearly Things is, but Just Pearly Things uses this quite a bit. By the way, I'm not a super fan of Pearly Things, but I've heard her say this a few times. Don't shoot the messenger.
Well, here's the thing. I've been saying this for a long time, since 2017. Things aren't going to change until women demand change, because men don't have any kind of political power as a gender. We just don't, not anymore. And we haven't had power since probably the 80s. So, you know, while I'm not a big fan of Pearly Things, the fact that there are women out there like her who are stepping up and saying this is what's going on. Don't get me wrong. Pearly Things is, you know, she's a below average attractive woman who is basically a very skilled attention whore. My other belief is that whatever she's saying with the full blessing of the United Kingdom government, because I've heard of guys say a lot of what she says and they get arrested. So,
well, yeah,
under UK's laws, but the fact that she's saying it, I mean, you have to understand, I'm of two minds. I'm not a real big fan of her because all she does is regurgitate other people's content without giving them credit. But on the same token, women have to step up if they want to fix what's going on. They want to fix the marriage rate. They want to fix the single mother rate. They want to fix all these boys who grow up to broken boys who grow up to be broken men, and they want to strengthen society. They have to go out publicly and start talking about this in real credible ways. Pearly Things does that, and I respect her for that. But on the other side, I fully agree with Neroke outside of that one issue. And so I feel like if I didn't say that and make sure that, you know, people might think I might be a hypocrite. So there's that.
Well, yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That Pearly Things says the things that the Manosphere says, but she says it in a way that will cause people to listen because, well, woman for one. And yeah, she does adopt stuff from other people's. She takes concepts and ideas from other guys in the Manosphere, and she adopts it, and she just basically copy paste repeat what they say. But I mean, yeah, credit where credit's due, you know. And this is one of the things that Turd Flinging Monkey pointed out years ago when he was doing the Enemies of Man series, right? Male sexual need will cause a male to listen much more attentively to a woman, especially if you're a younger guy, than it was if it was coming out of a guy's mouth, right? And I mean, I've seen that happen. Like Lauren Southern was another one, right? She turned out to be a complete hypocrite and shill, by the way.
But people still follow her even knowing better. That's the problem. I mean, the cuck is real.
Yeah. You know, keep in mind, Lauren Southern did something around the residential schools in Canada, which she does still do some good work, but yeah, what she did to her ex in Australia, when I was listening to that, I was like, and I'm like, because I wasn't at the event when she was here in Edmonton covering the lab, basically 2015, because that was the day I was taking my 30-year cake, so I couldn't do anything. I couldn't attend anything that day. But you know, she was at, and she had spoken with prominent members of MRAs. She talked to that guy in the cheerleader costume. By the way, I'm the only guy in the world that's actually interviewed that guy. It's called Interview with Walking Away Man. It's not up at YouTube anymore, but BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble, it's there. I'm the only guy that's ever interviewed that guy. Yeah, he is actually a MGTOW. He's not a plant. A lot of people thought he was, but he's not. You know, and when I was listening to what Lauren Southern, and I don't want to get off too much into a slam woman thing, because this is a dynamic and the guys have to take responsibility on their end. But Lauren Southern knew about all of the stuff all of the lies, all of the deception, all of the misleading, the gaslighting, all of that stuff. She knew about all that stuff because there were guys in them. It's like, I mean, I was like, say, I wasn't there, but the guys from Men's Rights Edmonton were there talking to her after the event, right? So she knows, and she was deeply involved in the manosphere at one point, so she knows all this stuff. And then she turns around, she has a kid with a guy down in Australia, and she like literally turns around and goes and does all of the things that she knew that she knows because she was told about this stuff to that guy in Australia. And this was revealed on Rollo Tomasi. Again, a guy, there's some mixed opinions about Rollo Tomasi. I'm not gonna get too much into him, but I mean, yeah, it's like, so yeah. I'm glad, and just like how feminists have male have male feminists, there's gonna be femras.
Now,
And with
Neroke, the one thing though that I have to ask you though, like with this organization that you're in, are there situations that occur with people that are within the group, you know, who are non-custodial parents that they have to contend with like threats from their spouses concerning, you know, custodial
all the time.
visitation and like you know, threats of the police being called and stuff like that? I mean,
Yeah. Yes, all the time. In fact, at one point, that was probably the single largest faction in MGTOW. It happens all the time. Some people are actually dumb enough to get married 2 and 3 times before it sinks in. But yeah, I see that all the time.
And to dovetail Neroke's answer, I actually did. So I work with an attorney out of Alabama, who her name is Melissa Isaac, and I work with her sometimes. And we've done some streams together online, her and Eric Carroll, myself, and who was the guy who did the Boy Crisis? Dr. I forget his name.
Tom Golden?
No, the myth
Warren
of male
Farrell.
power.
Warren Farrell.
So Warren Farrell is like he's like a male feminist, but this is a guy who he's really walked the walk, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but honestly, you know, nobody has to agree with everything anybody says. But Warren Farrell and I, while we were on that stream, we had a conversation, and one of the things I talked about is the fact that a lot of women will have their exes killed. So if you piss off this woman enough, she'll find somebody to murder you. Oh. And it was interesting because I brought up a couple of examples of it, and Warren goes, yeah, fathers get assassinated all the time by their ex-wives, and most of the time the police never investigate.
Well, wasn't there a situation in Washington where this one woman and the axe showed up at this guy's house, and the guy died and was killed?
Yeah, that was in my book. So basically what it was is that the guy and the husband and the wife were divorced. The mother was the primary residential custodian, and she was trying to falsely accuse the father of domestic violence and that sort of thing, right? And so she had contacted the local domestic violence nonprofit or, you know, NGO organization to seek support. And so the advocate, the domestic violence advocate, said, "Oh, I'll go to the custody transfer with you," because, you know, when you have to do custody transfers to the non-custodial so they can have visitation. Well, the father was kind of hip to this, and the fathers decided, well, you know, I want to be, you know, I'm concerned that this woman's going to say something. And in a he said, she said situation, about 90% of the time, the court will side with the woman, regardless if she's credible or not, right? So if the guy says one thing, the woman says something else, they'll just believe the woman. This guy knew that, so he brought his sister with him for the custody transfer. So they did the custody transfer. There were words that were spoken. He puts the kids in the car with his sister, right? They drive back to his home. Well, the mom, who just transferred the kids over, and the domestic violence advocate, The domestic violence advocate was driving the car the mother was in, and they chased him. So they chase him home, they follow him home, and they pull in. He sees that they're following him, and he's like, what is going on here? So he tells his sister, take the kids inside, I'll deal with this. He gets out of the car, and as he gets out of the car, the sister grabs the children. They run inside the house. There were neighbors across the street who kind of heard them pull up, because the woman who pulled up behind him like screeched to a stop and basically made a big showing. Jumped out of the car, ran up to him, didn't say a word to him as he's trying to figure out what's going on, shoots him in the chest. And then when he falls to the ground, she puts a bullet in his head in front of his children. And this whole time, this guy, he's never abused his children. He's never abused his wife. The wife has a history of making false allegations. This domestic violence advocate murders him in cold blood. They were going to file criminal charges against him. They filed first-degree murder, but then when they found out she was a DV advocate, they dropped it to second degree. Then after that, they gave her the minimum jail time they could give her. And even after all that, this DV advocate's cuck husband was still trying to get her exonerated, because he was just, the cuck is strong, the simp is strong. And the ex-wife never got charged as an accessory. Never got charged, never got investigated. They just said, oh, somebody else did it, and there it is. And the reality is that they probably likely planned it together. And then they found out, when they went through the background of this DV advocate, they found out she had a history of anger management problems. The other DV advocates in her office were terrified of her because she would constantly threaten people and get in their face. She was just this angry hag who just had murder on her mind the whole time. And this guy wasn't even the first dude she shot. The first guy she shot was a couple years prior, where she was going out to the club, because yes, of course, she's a bar whore. She goes out to the club, she walks outside, some dude asks her for a cigarette, and she pulls out a revolver and shot him 5 times. Fortunately, she was a shitty shot at the time, and this guy actually tried to dodge and weave to get out of the way, so he only got hit a couple times, and none of it was damaging. And by the way, the police never prosecuted her then either, because she tried to claim in her defense that she was warding off a sexual assailant. So you have to understand, like, this stuff happens. Men die. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked on a family court case where the father's about to get custody, and then all of a sudden he dies. So, you know, the whole threat of extortion and all that thing, and the child support thing that Neroke talks about, it's all real, but it is way worse than what most people talk about.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say there, I haven't actually seen it, but I've been told about it. There is a book out there, How to Ruin a Man's Life. There's an actual book out there on how to do it, which of course you'll never hear women talk about, or feminists talk about, or openly acknowledge, or any social justice warrior or anything like that. No, they will never admit to that. There's blogs out there. Dean Esme mentioned, this is before Dean Esme kind of had his little mental break, but Dean Esme mentioned this as well. Dean Esme used to be a part of A Voice for Men, and I'm not going to go into details, but yeah, Dean Esme had a little bit of a mental break. Don't know whether he's better now, but I mean, he didn't go completely off the deep end like Nick Redding from Men's Rights Edmonton, but he had a mental break. That's what dealing with individuals like this will do if you're not particularly, on our side, if you're not well adjusted and you don't have enough wisdom and enough humility to actually self-reflect on your own actions. Being in this environment and dealing with the really toxic people that you have to deal with can really sometimes, you have to be able to pay attention to your own mental and emotional state of mind, which is what happened with me in 2016, right? I was under a lot of stress, and I wasn't giving it the amount of attention that I normally did, and because I did, I ended up falling for that woman a lot harder than I normally would have. And that's something that I always pay attention to now. And that was my part of when I did my inventory on it. That was my part of it. False accusations is something, and R.K. Hendrick talked about it in his book. It's like he's mentioned it a lot of time when I've seen seen his posts. It's like it used to be that, you didn't bring up, you didn't falsely accuse the husband of raping the kids unless it was actually happening. But it happens. It's like almost par for the course now that somebody alleges sexual assault. I don't know. I don't work in the courts like DDJ is, so I don't know how common that is. But that is a very. I've heard of it happening enough times. I even read a case at one point, and I don't know why. It's like, by the way, guys, this is a sticking point, and this is something. Yeah, I'm going to bring up Rollo Tomasi, but the second rule of one of the iron rules of Rollo Tomasi is don't go back to your ex. Don't dig through your own go through your own garbage. Everybody sees you doing it, and it's never as good as you think it's going to be the second time. Oop, we made Karma leave.
It's fine. She just usually comes in and listens and then leaves, so it's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, and it's like, so this guy, and I guess he was still sexually attracted to his ex, but he had sex with her the next day. Good luck with your date, Karma. The police knock on his door, and it was like, well, your semen was found around your child's anus. So what she had done is that she had saved the semen and had used it to fake a false accusation. That's on that is on the child custody side. On the side that I come from, because like I said, I was smart. To me, marriage and a long-term relationship, I didn't see the benefit of it, so I avoided it. But I mean, I had to deal with a lot of false accusations, and again, like from the non-custodial side, if you are a guy who is thoughtful, considerate, kind, polite, soft-spoken, you don't necessarily go around, and I don't, although even the big tough alpha males know better than to cross me now in the crowds that I run with, right? But if you're perceived as maybe being if you have these traits, right? There is a type of female, there's a type of woman out there, a serial false accuser, and they specifically look for guys like this. And I feel I sympathize with guys like this, because I mean, with a lot of them, and this is if I'm talking about one of you, if you're one of these guys that is listening to this, my iron rule when it comes to dealing with women, and I mean, I still end up getting a lot of female attention anyway, is that I don't do, first of all, work, 12-step meetings, in a lot of other social situations. I will specifically with work. I mean, like, that's a no-go zone. Like, I don't get involved with anybody you work with. If you're at school, don't get involved with anybody, specifically somebody that's right in your class, like in the same year. Like, don't do that. Like, there's a lot of places where it's a no-go zone. But I mean, when I go out into the world, most of the time, like, I am, like, it's like, I mean, I made an exception tonight because, I mean, I actually had to go to this mall anyway to take care of something. But, I mean, there's somebody that I kind of clicked with, and I have to go into that store anyway, so I kind of went out on my way tonight. But it's extremely rare that I will go out of my way to talk to or meet up with a woman. It's a it's just a dangerous social environment. And here's the ironic part, and we talked about this right at the very start of the show. Even though I'm not specifically out looking for them, if I am not careful, if I'm not constantly paying attention to my presence, like, I could very easily end up having. Basically, I could very easily end up having a stable, and I'm not even working on it. Like, I'm not even consciously working on it. I mean, I have had this happen at one point, and I had to just kind of like go, okay, right? It's consuming too much of my time. I have to kind of like step back and make sure that making myself less present. And there's things that you can do to kind of reduce your prominence. But I mean, you know, and DDJ has talked about this. Confidence is not necessarily something. I mean, I'm going to bring up Tate. Like, there's the face that Tate puts on when he goes on his streams, and then there's the face that Tate has when he's not off the stream. And I've seen videos of him on both occasions, right? Like, I do not go around. Um, like I do not go around like acting dominant. But it's like, yeah, for some strange reason, right? I always get noticed, and I'm in my mid 50s, and like I say, if I'm not careful, it can happen. Part of that though is the realization that, and I've talked with other guys who are MGTOW about this. It's, like, even when I'm doing something as simple as, say, going into a coffee shop, right? Like, I'm going into, like, say, if I'm just going to a coffee shop to just chill out and listen to music, right? Like, that is the intention when I'm going in. So I'm actually going in there with that intention,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just the vibe that gives off versus when you're just going in there just for the sake of going in there, it's a different vibe. I've actually asked around, and it's like, yeah, there's a different vibe when you're going into a public place with an intention versus whether you're just going in there just to go in there, or whether you're going in there to meet women or whatever. It's a different vibe, and people will pick up on that. Even if it's just to basically just go in there to have a cup of coffee and just put some tunes on and just chill out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you always, when I'm in those situations again, right? And this comes back from when I was back from my PUA days. I don't do an approach on a woman unless I get indicators of interest above and beyond 100%. Because I can't take that chance. I had one particular incident that occurred a few years ago. Actually, this was 2017 on the bus, and there was this one woman, and she kept looking at me, 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 and it looked like she was interested, right? So I actually started talking to her, and the moment I started talking to her, it was like some switch just flipped on her. All of a sudden, she just starts flipping. I was like, "Don't talk to me, leave me alone." I was like, "Well, why were you looking at me then?" "No, I wasn't." It's like, "Yes, you were." Multiple times, right? And we got to the bus stop at the university, and she got off the bus. And the moment she got off the bus, she went over and started looking at me, and she's on her cell phone, and she's like, and I could tell the way she was looking at me that she was describing me. And it was like, oh crap, I know what's going on here, right? So the bus took off, and the next stop after that, what there the way that bus stop is set up is that there's a bus stop about half a block before the actual LRT station. And it was like, and I took a look at what I was wearing. Unfortunately, I happened to have my work jacket on. No, I happened to not want work jacket on, but I had my work jacket in my backpack. So what I did is I got off, took off my winter jacket, put on my work jacket, put on my toque, and then because the bus, when it gets to that station, it has to stay there for about 10 minutes. Then I walked over back to the train station. And when I got to the train station, I I literally like walked past a police officer who had gone on to that bus, probably looking for me, and he walked right past me. Right, so it's even if you do get even if you do get IOIs, like a really like super positive situation, you still gotta be, there's just places that you just don't do it. And if you like, I mean, my another thing I do around women is that if I get anything resembling a mixed message, it's like boom, like I pull the chute and I jump from the plane. Again, right, you might want to accuse me of being paranoid, and if because I've done that, I have actually, I haven't had any real serious issues since then, right?
Mhm.
You know, it's also a lot of it with me too is also making sure that I'm aware of my state of mind. Like if I'm going through a very difficult period of time in my life, like if I'm under a lot of stress, and this particular year, for instance, I've had some fairly stressful moments. It's like when I understand that if I'm going through a difficult period, like part of the coping, this is what DDJ was talking about, people using to deal with stressful situations, right? Well, you don't necessarily have to use drugs. Some people use gambling, some people use sex, whatever. So I mean, when I'm going through a stressful period in time, the first thing that goes is that like I remove the female influence, any type of serious female influence from my life, like altogether, right? Because I don't want to be adding to my difficulties. And, I mean, again, because I got to keep saying this, it's like, yeah, you know what? I mean, I understand to a lot of guys out there who are blue pilled or don't want to accept the reality of the situation that me and TDJ have been talking about tonight, right? But you know what? It's happened to me enough times, and I've seen it happen to enough other guys, and I've met enough guys online that, like I don't want to do one of the quotes from the Manosphere. You can either know women or you can love them. It's like you know, you don't want to paint all women with a really nasty negative brush, but because of what's happened and because there's so much feminist indoctrination specifically with Western women, you know, you really have I personally, you know, anybody else wants to do it differently, that's your choice. You can find out the hard way, but I have to personally treat every woman that I deal with like a potential loaded gun. And that also, by the way, includes my family members. They're still, well, my mom is dead now, but like for instance, I don't tell my two sisters anything about what's going on in my life unless I'm prepared for everybody else in the family to find out, right? And I mean, like, yeah, it sucks. It's maybe not fair because I know a lot of women don't do that. But I mean, I'm sure DDJ has an opinion on this guy as well. Undead Chronic has pointed out something, and this is a very blunt truth about women in the West in particular. They have never had it so good. They are in almost an ideal environment, right?
Mhm.
When they
Well,
have,
that's been the case for 30 years. I
yeah,
mean, it's
they're
just yeah, that's true. It's unrestricted hypergamy.
yeah, it's an idealized environment. It's they have no reason to make any changes. They have no reason to be calling out the sisterhood has no reason to be calling out any of the other sisters in it because they're all benefiting from it. Even if they're not necessarily taking advantage of men, right? They're all benefiting from it. And Undead Chronic said this in the most blunt way possible. It's sort of like, and this is something that a lot of guys need to be. This is a question that a lot of guys need to be asking themselves. Like, do you want to be involved with a woman in that type of an environment where she can just simply turn on you on a dime and throw your life into absolute chaos? And I mean, yeah, you know, there is the male sexual need, and I see a lot of guys apparently who don't seem to quite understand that didn't go from like 13 to 56 overnight. Like I went through my 20s and 30s too, right? Like I understand the testosterone, I understand the perpetual horniness that a teenager had to go through, and DDJ went through it too, right? Like I understand where they are, right? Um, at the same time, though, I have met men in their late teens, in their early 20s, that have been able to master their sex energy and are been able to transfer that over into something else and make something of themselves and be perfectly okay doing it. So to say that if you're one of those younger guys going, oh, well, he's 55, he doesn't understand. Yeah, I do understand. And, you know, I'm going to have to be really blunt here. I have met guys, late teens, early 20s, that have been able to do this. If they can do it, you can do it. And here's the beautiful thing about this is that, there's even if you're not really physically attractive, right? Like even if you say you're one of those guys who's like 5'5" and butt ugly, and that's something that somebody is not physically attractive to women, right? Like this is a state of mind that even guys like that can achieve and really be happy and satisfied. And you don't even necessarily have to have a woman in your life to do it. And it's like, I'm not saying you don't need a woman, right? But it's sort of like, the current social environment it's so rigged against men right now that it's not really worth the difficulty. And here's the thing, the whole greater picture about the manosphere, right? And I'm gonna have to go back to Andrew Tate on this. So by the way, just so that I can set the record straight here, I am not a Tate fanboy by any stretch of the imagination. But when they bring in the mainstream media, when they bring up the manosphere, like they will talk about Tate, or they will talk about Fresh and Fit, or they will talk about Sandman, but they will never, and I have noticed this continuously, they will never, except in a mocking way, of course, they will never talk about the other stuff, which is where I'm going to probably end off the show tonight, about breaking down some of the stereotypes that exist, right? They never talk about, supporting guys who are dealing with nasty marriages, nasty divorces, child custody, false accusations, guys who are in relationships where it's like the guy can't really divorce her because he gets shafted in divorce and he can't really stay with her either. They don't talk about the support network that's being built up around that. Right? They will not discuss the issues. They'll keep talking about Tate till their jaw drops off. Mm-hmm. Right? They'll talk about DDJ, or they'll talk about me, or they'll talk about what I said. But the moment you start getting into actual issues, right? Oh no, they go mute, right? And because. And it's like, so are women collectively in the West going to change? No, I hate to say this, but I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer here, but under these current circumstances, no. And it's like what Bezmenov said, they're not going to change. Even a lot of these women are not going to change, even when they're told what's coming, until it actually hits them square in the face. So, currently the manosphere, and I'm talking about the manosphere in whole, we've crossed that 1 to 1.5%. It's at the point now where I'm running into people who are familiar with manosphere topics offline. Now, within the next 12 to 24 months, MGTOW all by itself will be at that level. And the rest of them, we're also talking about PUA, Red Pill, MRA, that type of thing. There's multiple groups inside the manosphere. As this continues to get bigger, this information is going to start to spread. And there's a lot, like, I'm finding out that most women know about the manosphere now, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why it's starting to come under this vitriolic attack, because it's like, the men are figuring it out now. Red
Pill is mainstream.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Red Pill is mainstream. Men are starting to figure it out, right? Because there's enough of us, and they're desperately trying. That's. And again, I want to bring up Tate here. The difference between say what Tate does and what Fresh and Fit or Terrence Pop or Hammerhand, like the thing that really got people pissed off about Tate is that Tate would freely give his opinion on issues outside of the manosphere. Whereas, say, a guy like Rollo Tomasi would just simply key in. Rollo Tomasi actually, he's even said it on his show, right? He does everything humanly possible to avoid discussing issues outside, like political issues outside of the manosphere, because it's bad for his brand. Tate wasn't like that. Tate would give his opinion on pretty much everything, and he was such a widely Googled guy, and he was such a widely known individual that of course they were going to go after him. But again, right, when it specifically comes to Tate, they will talk about Tate. They won't get into or what he said, and they'll take his comments and they'll take them out of context. And I'm not going to get into everything about Tate because that would be an entire show in of itself. Mm-hmm. But I mean, they will talk about Tate. They won't talk about the things that he says or the issues that he raises.
We have come to like an hour and a half and everything, and DDJ said he has like maybe about an hour or two that he can put in with us. So with that being said, is there any way that we could get in touch with you guys and be able to contact you outside of this interview?
Well, I mean, you can get a hold of me on Skype. Okay. You can also, like I say, I do actually have a web page. It's called the Red Pill Nation at WordPress. Not very many people know, and I don't post up there very much. But that's a good way. Best way to get a hold of me, away from Skype, is probably to contact me via Rumble, Odyssey, or BitChute. I am on YouTube as Gold Dragon, but I don't promote that channel anymore because YouTube has just gotten too censorious.
Yeah. And I do use WordPress, so if you've got a link for that, put it in my Live with Roger Hansen.
Oh, yeah, I'll post up all the social links that I've got.
I'll hook up with you on that.
The only social media that I use right now is Gab, and when I start posting videos, I'm probably going to just post them on Gab. BitChute seems to censor my videos where they just won't load. So fortunately, I've got all my catalogs saved offline, but I'll probably end up reposting those all on Gab. I'm not doing it yet because I'm basically taking care of a couple other things first. But that said, I'm just like Neroke. I'm on YouTube. I've got some stuff on BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, but I think Odyssey just got sued, so don't be surprised if Odyssey goes away.
Yeah, library got shut down, and now they're worried about Odyssey having a rippling effect from it. So,
Odyssey is going to eventually get to the same level that Rumble is at. They same thing with BitChute. Oh, by the way, they have DDJ. They have fixed the uploader at BitChute.
That's good.
Yeah, they have fixed the uploader at BitChute. I will post up all of those links. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give out like I say, my group on Facebook is my main Facebook group is called the Red Pill Nation.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I am there under my real name, so I
go in there and switch your name around if that's a problem, because they've just made changes where you can't do that. So if you don't want your real name, go into Facebook, switch it out.
I'm banned on Facebook, or else I would use it.
I stopped using it.
I'm also banned on Twitter as well.
Yeah, I stopped.
Oh, actually, you may want to look at Twitter again. I think you might be able to get back on Twitter.
I know I can't.
Oh.
I can't. That's one of the reasons I think Elon Musk is a con man, because he's like, oh yeah, but he can get back on Twitter. No, you can't. It's all bullshit. So I know, because I contacted them when he did his bullshit amnesty thing, and they're like, no, you can't do it, because apparently my posts are too much of a threat. So whatever.
Well, again, right, the whole situation. Do we have another half hour here, or are we?
I've got about 20 minutes max.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess we can go. We still got 20.
before you guys take off, I do want to let you know you are more than welcome, both of you, to come back on my show. Okay, so if you guys want to set up another thing like this where we get together and do it, I mean, let me know, and we'll get something started. Because I agree with you, Neroke, about a lot of these other shows not talking about the important issues, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this, okay? Because I could sit and bash women all night, you know what I mean? Anybody can do that, but like, what about the more serious issues? Like,
well,
Yeah.
the issue is that like a blind person, right, can identify a problem, but the harder part is how do you come up with viable solutions? And in a lot of cases, MGTOW does that, and the reality is that actual MGTOW don't hate women. You know, they don't hate women. They just understand women. They understand the threat that some of these, and again, it's a societal issue. It's not all biological. It's not like, oh, women are like this no matter what, right? So you have to understand, like, it's like, and again, this is like what Neroke said about this other thing. This is a subject that you could do a whole show on, or possibly a series on, and really deep dive into it. It's just that a lot of people don't want to have these conversations right now because you know, it's threatening to their, like Neroke says, it's threatening to their brand. And that's just because they're not interested in really helping men. They're more interested in having a brand and their own personal popularity. And so there's a lot of us, and I believe Neroke included, where even though his brand is important, the thing about Neroke is that his goal is to help men first and everything else is secondary. And that's one of the reasons I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, yeah, all right. Here's an example of a brand. Bulldog Mindset on YouTube went a few years ago went on absolutely vitriolic attacks against MGTOW. You want to know what I saw yesterday? Bulldog Mindset is on MGTOW TV.
Yeah, because what's happening is that it's the same thing with Rollo Tomasi, right? Rollo Tomasi attacked MGTOW, and a lot of these other bigger content creators, they attacked MGTOW only because they didn't want anybody to assume that basically they were just regurgitating MGTOW content, which is what Rollo does, right? And a lot of these other content creators, they do. Donovan Sharp is the same thing. You get a lot of these, you know, Fresh and Fit, you get a lot of these people, they go online, they're like, oh, MGTOW's horrible, they're incels, or this, or that, they're just trash people, right? Then what they do is they start posting MGTOW content, but they make it look like, oh, this is my content, this is my original knowledge. And it's like, no, it's not. You're just regurgitating what MGTOW said 15, 20 years ago, or, you know, what like TFM and people like him said in 2015, right? So I think that, you know, a lot of these people, they do it specifically so they're able to regurgitate the content and then not have to actually give credit where credit's due, or to do that because they're threatened. Because again, they went on Steam, they bought the video game How to Be a YouTuber, and they took themselves too seriously. That's honestly, I think that's really what's going on.
Okay, so yeah, in regards to the misogyny and hating women, okay, are there guys in MGTOW that are like that? Yeah. Here's the thing about it, and I mean, I'm gonna have to be blunt here again. There is the majority of this is not one of the universals with MGTOW, but the most guys who go on MGTOW will go through this, a form of red pill rage, where you have to deal with the anger and the need to vent, right? If you're one of those people who, and I encounter them on the MGTOW sites at Facebook all the time, oh, why is everybody here bitching about women? It's sort of like, well, you know what? Photographers talk about cameras. Mechanics talk about cars. People in AA and NA will relate their experiences with drugs and alcohol. So why is it such a stretch that you see so many guys in MGTOW talking about women when that's one of the you know, the whole thing with MGTOW is dealing with relationships with women and coming up with a strategy to make their lives effectively, you know, to, if they want to, you can be happy and basically be the happy bachelor. But yeah, let me just, because we still got about 15, 20 minutes. I just want to go through a few stereotypes here. I just want to address them really quickly. First of all, MGTOW is not incel. incel is short for involuntarily celibate. They are involuntarily celibate because they cannot get sexual or validation from women. MGTOW is anti-gynocentric, which is the rejection of female approval. So it's like you literally cannot be both at the same time. In order to, because I mean, to get sexual gratification or to get sex requires female approval. So it's like, yeah, you literally cannot be both at the same time. So that whole charge about can't get laid or can't, well, I mean, first of all, I'm the one that can't get laid. It's like, if MGTOW are MGTOW because they can't get laid, then explain all the single fathers in MGTOW, right? Because I mean, I think you kind of have to have sex in order to have a kid, right? So that one gets defeated. MGTOW are quitters. I actually had to go really hard. In fact, I almost went on his show. Unfortunately, I was working that day. The Come On Man podcast, where it was like nobody likes a quitter. It's like, no, what I've done is I have quit making women the center of my life. That does not mean that I have not given up. I'm not.
Well,
Yeah.
That's just ignorant shaming language because the guy's threatened by MGTOW, and that's okay.
Yeah.
He has to live with his insecurity.
Well, I mean, I went after him for it. It's sort of like, well, I mean, he posted this up, and it was sort of like, oh, well, dude, you know what? You want to be a bully? You know what? Then it's like, this is me quitting. This is what happens when you try to go at that. And this is just me personally. If I see one of these guys walk into the MGTOW sphere and start throwing the insults around, it's like, there's people in the MGTOW community that will go, oh, well, just let them. And it's like, it's unfortunate for me personally, that really does not wash, because for me, it's like, yeah, okay, like I could be hardcore libertarian about it and say, I got mine, fuck everybody else. But it's like, there's thousands, and by the way, there are thousands. The number of guys who've gone MGTOW in North America is going to surpass 1 million at some point next year.
Oh no, it already has. The only difference is that the silent MGTOW, the guys who don't actually know the MGTOW term, they're probably 5 million, and the guys that are identify as MGTOW, is probably, I'd say, a couple 100,000 minimum.
Well, it's gonna surpass the ones who are officially MGTOW. I suspect it's gonna surpass 1 million at some point next year. Though all those guys are coming up behind me. Some of those guys are new. Some of those guys are still dealing with anger, frustration, pain, regret. They're still processing it. They're still in the red pill rage. And you get one of these idiots that comes in and starts throwing around insults. At least for me personally, if I see somebody doing that, I have done it. In fact, I had to do it with somebody here about a month ago. I will personally go out of my way and get, well, I mean, I haven't had to get in the guy's face because it's only happened online, but I will make sure that he knows that if he stays in this sphere, that he's going to have a fight on his hands. Right? And I don't do it because it doesn't affect me personally, but I mean, the way I view it, and this is the same way that I have family members that run a recovery house, and they got people in their treatment facility that are new. It's like there's literally people's lives on the line, and this guy's coming in and being a bully, and somebody out there might get the wrong message and go out and kill themselves, right? And it's sort of like, so yeah, I sort of like, yeah, no, there's people's lives on the line. I make sure when I see these guys coming in that they know that they're going to get hit back. And then I will usually make an effort to make sure they get removed from the site if I can do it. And most of the time I am able to do it. But I mean, yeah, MGTOWs are not quitters. They do not, it's not a female boycott. It's not masculine separation, although there's a lot of guys in MGTOW that will go full monk mode. They're not losers living in their parents' basement. I haven't lived in my parents' basement for a very, very, very long time. You know, uh, and they're not guys who just basically go home and play video games all day rather than go out and do something. I have a very active life outside of the internet, and I've been making more of an, like I say, depending upon the situation. I have a full and active life outside of the internet, which I strive to maintain. Um, you know, I I don't spend all my time, like for instance, Miss 2016. Although DDJ heard Miss 2016, by the way, is actually getting married. I found out about that in August. That threw me for a loop for about 12 hours. Uh, you know, but I don't spend my time feeling sorry for myself because this woman, that woman, or some other woman uh did something to me. I don't spend my time feeling sorry for myself because of female nature. This is something that turd flinging monkey said years ago. This like the behavior that you're seeing now with modern Western women always existed. It's just that in this current environment, all the worst aspects of women are allowed to basically go unchecked,
Hmm.
right? So these behaviors always existed, and it's I mean, again, right? It's I'm not going to enter into a legal contract with a woman where basically, I'm effectively rendered a slave to the state. And if I'm going to talk about because I mean, I've had the luxury of speaking to guys that are MGTOW from Argentina, from Australia, from South Africa, from India, from Israel, from Russia. And the consistent factor, regardless of the culture, regardless of the religion, regardless of the society, the consistent factor that seems to be tying all, actually, that doesn't seem, uh, is that what it's boiling down to is that, you know, the people who are running the elites, like the people at the top, far too often view the citizens of their own country as disposable pawns and tools that they can just use at their leisure and just throw away. And, you know, um, and guys are getting smart to, I mean, for instance, there's something in China called lying flat man, which is basically a Chinese version of MGTOW. And there's also been, of course, let's not even get into Japan and South Korea with Hikikimori, which in terms of numbers probably still has more. There's still more probably like Hikikimori in Japan and South Korea than there are MGTOWs on the entire planet at this point. Um, so yeah, it's gone, but MGTOW in particular has gone in less than 10 years. It's gone from something that had maybe, like when I first joined, had maybe at most 5,000 people in it. It's gone from something that was strictly a Western, like basically a North American phenomenon, and it's gone worldwide, and it's on every country. You can't, you wouldn't be able to shut down MGTOW now. It's in, like, literally, I mean, I typed in, pick a country, type the word MGTOW after it, you'll find something online about it. So it's gone from just a few thousand people to millions, and I do mean millions, in less than 10 years. That's how bad the situation is for most men worldwide at this point. And it's going to continue to get bigger. So it's going to come under more vitriolic attack. Uh, and I'm just going to end off with some of the other stereotypes that like one of the other ones is that, if a woman decides that she doesn't need a man, it's like, oh yeah, you go, girl. But if a guy decides to not do it, then he's a coward and a quitter. And it's like, no, no, no. It's like, no. It's a guy's figured out the situation and has decided that. And you know, they talk about this in the red pill sphere. If you make lots of money and you get buff and you get looks, you'll get girls, and then they don't tell. That's something that I noticed that the PUA red pill community doesn't talk about. It's sort of like, yeah, you also end up making yourself a larger target. Uh, Other things that have occurred, for instance, around, well, there was recently a big, huge kerfuffle because Leonardo DiCaprio was dating a woman who was 19 years old, and there was women screaming at the top of their lungs about that. However, when I started reminding them about Cher and Madonna and Jada Pinkett Smith, well, one of them responded. And she said that that wasn't correct either. But, when I brought those women up, they went dead silent. And I heard this from Coach Greg Adams, but I mean, I've heard it elsewhere too, right? The concept of midlife crisis, which somehow magically only applies to men, and Coach Greg Adams did the best video I've seen on it. That's not midlife crisis. That is women, because when these guys get to a certain age where they've got, and this is me as well, they got money, they got resources, right? They've got the ability now to pretty much date whatever women they want. These are older women attempting to shame men because they have a preference. That's one. When the she-bear, when she's not happy, ain't nobody happy. There's another myth that needs to be dispelled. Excuse me. I'm sorry, miss. You're having a bad day. Your kids, your husband, the people in your household are not your whipping posts, right? Find another way to deal with it. It's not, you don't have the right. The guy doesn't have the right to come home after you're having a shitty day and start beating up his wife and kids. The woman, when she has a shitty day, shouldn't have the right to come home and start yelling and screaming and taking out her pain and frustration on everybody else in the household. That's another one that has to go. There's a few others, but those are the only ones that I can immediately think of. There's a whole bunch more, and we're probably running a little low on time, so we probably don't have enough time to get into the stereotypes.
Before you guys do leave, I noticed both of you mentioned you got books. So let's put a plug on your books and tell everybody what books you have available for everybody to read.
I have a blog. I don't have books.
Well, that's fine.
I got the Red Pill Nation at WordPress is my blog. I say this at the start of every show. A version of Neroke at Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, MGTOW TV, which is strangely enough, my largest following is on MGTOW TV right now. Brighteon, although I don't post up at Brighteon very much. I am also available via the Red Pill Nation at Facebook, but I also have accounts at MeWe, Gab, Minds, and I'm also at Getter. I used to be on Parler, but Parler's pretty much dead at this point. I also have a Patreon as Neroke5, which I'm probably going to have to shut. I keep meaning to shut it down, but I haven't, because Patreon's also one of those establishment sites. But I also have a Subscribe Star as the Red Pill Nation, and Patreon is Neroke5. That is pretty much it. I keep giving thought to maybe posting my stuff up at iTunes, and the hell is that? At iTunes, and the one with the green symbol. I can't remember what the name of it is.
Spotify,
iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, that type of thing. I keep thinking about posting up my audio content there, but it keeps skipping my mind. So maybe it's not time yet. It will eventually get posted on there. But yeah, I'm in a lot of different places. Like I say, I'm going to keep doing this till I die or find something better to do. And so far, I haven't found anything better to do. And I'm going to turn it over to DDJ.
DJ, you got books?
I do. I have a book on Amazon. It's also on the Apple Store, Barnes & Noble. It's called The Feminist Lie. It was never about equality. It's actually been on multiple bestseller lists on Amazon, and it's got a 4.5 or 4.6 out of 5 stars. So it's an easy read. I wrote it for people that don't read very often. I wrote it for people who really need to, delve into it. Like, it's a very basic primer on how to deal with feminism and how to approach it, and some of its basic core indefensible hypocrisies.
All right. That sounds great. Like I said, you guys, I enjoyed both of you being on here for both interviews. And with that being said, I'd like to welcome you guys back anytime you want to come back. And we'll end it here. Sound good?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Take care, guys.
Yep.
You too.
Yep. Thank you very much. Yep. See you guys next time. Thanks for having me. I'm going to hang up now. Have a good night.
You too.
Good night.
Bye.